I'm recording this today as Hurricane Idalia makes its way to the Big Bend, so hopefully everyone will be safe when this comes out on Sunday. Today's special guest is State Representative Angie Nixon, a Democrat from Jacksonville, who's been speaking out following the racially motivated killings of 3 black people at a Dollar General store over the weekend. Please join us for a very important conversation.
Let's be clear. This was white domestic terrorism that took place on Saturday.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State, Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam. Today's special guest is State Rep Angie Nixon. She is the Executive Director of Florida for All, and she has been speaking out about a horrific racially motivated shooting in Jacksonville, her hometown. Welcome to Deeper Dive, Representative Nixon.
Thank you for having me.
You have been very outspoken since the death of these 3 individuals, and I want to read their names. They are Angela Michelle Carr, 52, Anolt Joseph A.J. Laguerre Jr., 19, and Gerald Deshawn Gallion, 29. I'm sorry if I did not get their names correct, but I made my best effort. They were shot by a 21-year-old man at a Dollar General in Jacksonville's Newtown neighborhood. He first went to Edward Waters College, where a hero security guard sent him packing. You have said you've been present at these vigils over the weekend. We're recording this on a Tuesday. You have said that the state's policies and the rhetoric, the political climate in Florida has contributed to what happened on Saturday. Can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, I can definitely expand on that. The governor, since before he was governor of the state of Florida, has used rhetoric that was simply racist dog whistles. In one of the debates against Andrew Gillum, he said, "Don't monkey this up," right? He showed us who he was then. That rhetoric has not changed. It has since just permeated through much of the policies that he has pushed and the tone he has taken, the posture he has taken with the Black community. Many of the policies he's pushed and the rhetoric he's spewed has been anti-Black. I know that when I came into office in 2020, I was elected during, the majority peaceful uprisings of the brutal killing of George Floyd. The first policy that he pushed, HB 1, which was their top priority bill, which we call the anti-protest bill, was a bill that wanted to silence the righteous rage and frustration of communities when they feel as though they are voiceless, when they feel as though their elected officials aren't speaking up for them or doing anything for them, and when they want to protest. This bill is making it harder for folks to gather without being seen as mobs, because it's this very subjective policy where they can label groups of people who gather as mobs. We know how much implicit bias many of our law enforcement officers have in regards to especially Black people. Let's be real. Let's not sterilize it. Especially Black people. Ron DeSantis's war on wokeness and saying that Florida is where woke goes to die. He has this stop woke agenda. We know that it's simply code for Black people, and that is evident that he has lit the match, that then fanned the flames to cause what happened on this Saturday. He has been spewing such vitriol, hate through his policies, and has done nothing to denounce Nazis running around our state, pulling people out of cars, throwing up Nazi symbols and swastikas on government buildings, flying across the state on banners behind planes. He said nothing. He's done nothing to denounce those happenings. Instead of addressing real issues that Floridians care about, the bread and butter issues, the fact that there's an over 9,000 educator shortage in the state of Florida, the fact that people can no longer afford to live in their homes due to the rising cost of property insurance. We are currently about to face a hurricane this week, later today, and there are some people who are super uninsured or don't have insurance because they couldn't afford it because Ron DeSantis was beholden to the insurance companies and gave them a $3 billion bailout, as opposed to working to address the property insurance crisis. And then some folks can't even afford their rent. And so he instead goes to pick low-hanging fruit to rile up a base because he cares more about garnering votes to become the next president of the United States than actually doing his job. And my colleagues, my Republican colleagues in the legislature have done nothing to push back against him. The speaker, the Senate president, they have allowed Ron DeSantis to hijack their speakerships and presidency to push a hateful and harmful agenda. And that agenda has now resulted in the deaths of 3 Black people. And I am upset about it. And that's exactly what I mean by the fact that he's been fanning the hatred with his rhetoric, fueling the hatred with his rhetoric.
Was it you who said he has blood on his hands?
It was definitely me who said he had blood on his hands.
That's a very strong statement.
It's a very strong statement, but, he did. I don't know if y'all saw the pictures of him while he was sitting down at the vigil. He was very uncomfortable.
Let me ask you about that. What do you think about him showing up to the vigil? You mentioned the Stop Woke Act. You mentioned the HB1. I don't even like to call it anti-protest. It's really, they called it, I think, anti-riot act. I called it anti-protest act. They also, at the legislature, at his behest, also passed a bill to do away with diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in state governments. And, so I think there's this kind of belief that by the white power structure or by white people who are in power, Republicans, that we are in a post-racial world and we don't need to take race into consideration anymore. So there's a combination of these efforts that have been going on statewide over the past several years, as you mentioned. What do you think of Governor, and then we'll talk about Jacksonville, your community, in a moment. What do you think of Governor DeSantis attending the vigil in the first place?
I was absolutely livid. When I walked up, because I was asked to go sit in the audience, so I walked up from the side. I couldn't even see the folks in the audience. They were like, "Oh, we have a seat for you over there with the electors." I'm like, "No, I'm not sitting out there. Like, I want to stand with the people." And I got up to where I was standing and I looked and I was in total disbelief that he had showed up. I feel like he was the reason that this happened. He was one of the reasons that this happened, and it was the audacity for me. I immediately walked over to one of the pastors and I said, "What the hell?" Told the pastor, "What the hell?" Like, and he was like, "I know, Angie, I know." And I said, "I can't believe this." I said, "Are you going to talk about his role in this?" And then he said, "We can't get too political." And I'm like, well, why do we think this happened in the first place? I was pissed. I am pissed. And, I did not boo, but I understand why those folks were booing him when he got up to speak.
There's a picture of you. I was talking about it to you before we started recording, of you standing behind the governor with your hands on your hips and a t-shirt that I believe said, I don't have it in front of me, I think it said "Stand Up for Black Women." Stand with Black Women, I'm sorry. Stand with Black Women, and you've got your hands on your hips and you have this look on your face. I'm not really sure how to characterize it, but it really is one of those, if pictures paint 1,000 words, it's like if looks could kill kind of a look. I was wondering what you were thinking at that moment.
I was thinking a lot of things that would probably not be politically correct to say.
Right.
But I was just, one of the things that I can say is that I was thinking he should not be here. Or while he's here, he should apologize for his rhetoric and his role in what happened. And then I was thinking, this dude won't even say black. He will not say black or African American. This dude won't even call the guy a racist. He's calling him a scumbag. Like, let's call it out for what it is. And so I don't know if y'all have seen the clip towards the end, before he was, like, right when he was saying, this scumbag and this and that, I was saying, you could hear me saying, he's a racist. Call him a racist.
Right.
And so he would not.
He wouldn't say the word racist.
No, because I feel that he has done some message testing, and that word does not do well with the base that he is trying to turn out for his primary. And like, he's trying to stay away from it at all costs. But then, like someone said, the white supremacist ain't gonna call out white supremacy. And I believe that's true.
We talked about some of the things that have been going on in the state that could be agitating racists or white supremacists. It's also part of what's going on a national level. But also, your community, Jacksonville, has a long history of racially motivated attacks, of racists attacking black folks. I mean, it is noticeable that what happened on Saturday was the 63rd anniversary of Axe Handle Saturday, which was where a white mob armed with baseball bats and axe handles threatened, beat, and chased black residents in Jacksonville. I think, many people, dozens of people were injured. The violent attack, according to the Florida Historical Society, the violent attack was in response to peaceful lunch counter demonstrations. So your community has been sort of a hotbed for racist attacks for a long time. What do you say to people who say, well, that's just Jacksonville, that this has nothing to do with what's going on in the legislature or from the plaza level?
I mean, this is statewide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, that happened in Jacksonville, but Rosewood happened in our state. Ocoee happened in our state. There are other places where there has been state-sanctioned violence against Black people. And now we have a stop woke agenda that doesn't want us to learn about it. That says that when we speak about it, oh my God, it's making my children uncomfortable, it's making me uncomfortable, I don't want you to learn about it. Like, what's so ironic is that what took place on Saturday may not even be learned in schools if we allow this this woke agenda to continue in our state. That's wild to me. And this is not just a Jacksonville thing.
Yes.
This is a wide thing. This is what America was founded on. Let's be clear. Like, violence against Black and brown people. We're on stolen land. Like, we can't forget the fact that the natives were given blankets filled with diseases to kill them off so that white folks could take their land. And so folks get upset and say we're stoking division and causing this divide when we're just simply talking about history. Like, it happened. We need to own it and we need to figure out how to do better. But when you don't learn your history, you tend to repeat it. And it seems like that's what's happening today.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with State Rep Angie Nixon.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to a Deeper Dive with Dara. We didn't mention that the state also rejected the advanced placement African American studies.
They did, and then we also didn't state that Ron DeSantis came after 2 congressional Black access districts that he removed.
That's right.
And Representative McCarty sat on the House floor to push back and to protest against. And so it's like, dog, man, like, you just keep coming after Black people.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Stop Woke Act because at the time it kind of got over. There was a lot more talk about, I believe it was the same year that the Don't Say Gay bill got passed. And so there was a lot more focus on that. And this bill has been, this law, the Stop Woke Act, and it has a list of concepts that teachers are not allowed to teach in schools. Things like a person by virtue of his or her race, color, national origin, or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. A person's moral character or status as either privileged or oppressed is necessarily determined by his or her race, color, national origin, or sex. A number of different, they sound kind of far-fetched, but when you try to apply them to real lessons, teachers are telling us that they are restricting the way that history can be taught and the types of materials that children are allowed to access.
Yeah, so teachers are afraid that if they teach true history here in the state of Florida, that they are going to be stripped of their license or fired, right? And so that has caused them grave concern on top of all the other rigorous things that they have to do as far as being a teacher, like, they can't even really teach. So, like, why do it? And that's, I'm sure, one of the reasons we have this over 9,000 educator shortage. And then the fact is, teachers, people don't want to come to this state to teach as well. So I had a roommate over this past legislative session, and I know you're kind of talking K through 12 education, but there was a professor.
Yeah, this also applies to to higher ed.
Yeah. So I was HB 999. So like the stop woke agenda that came out this past legislative session. Yeah, the DEI bill and that kind of stuff. So yeah, his stop woke agenda went through 2 legislative sessions now. So I had a professor that I stayed with. She stated that there was some candidates that were coming to FSU. They had gotten job offers. They turned them down during the middle of legislative session because of these anti-DEI bills. And it's like, we are not preparing our children to be the best and brightest and to be able to compete in a global economy. We are actually hindering them because we are not providing them with true and accurate history. We're not providing them with the ability to learn how to not just group think, but to think critically. And that's upsetting. Everyone should be upset.
So you're in the state legislature. Democrats now, Republicans have supermajorities in the House and the Senate. So let's talk about solutions. How do we, we're turning the clock back in some ways. Folks are saying, like yourself are saying, we're turning the clock back. How do we stop that and undo some of the damage that's being done?
Yeah, for sure. So, the easiest thing that I can say, but I know it's sometimes hard because we have to educate people on why it matters, is for folks to get out and vote for the right people who aren't going to spew this hateful rhetoric. But then also, like, as legislators or as a community, folks have to hold legislators accountable for the policies that they are pushing, and they have to meet with them, and they have to come out to committees and then send emails. But I know they have done that, but it's like we have to keep up the pressure. We have to come together and continually do that. And then, the elected officials that don't agree with the rhetoric and don't believe that ideology, they need to not sit back and be complicit. They don't need to care more about bringing home a few appropriations or passing a few bills that aren't going to really transform communities. They don't need to sit idly by while others continue to stoke the flames that cause things to happen like what just transpired on Saturday.
So you're saying Republicans need to start speaking out and not supporting things that maybe they don't support secretly, but they feel like they have to.
Yes, you will not believe how many people have pulled me aside and say they don't agree with this and this is going too far. And I'm like, well, why you won't say anything? Why won't you vote against it? But they won't, because they're fearful. They're fearful that they'll be banished and won't get their bills passed, and they won't have the power that they think they have, which they really don't if they're not in current leadership, because they can't say anything. They can't dissent from whatever leadership says. That's not free. It's so wild to me that the politicians, the elected officials that always talk about freedom, they can't really be free to be who they are. They have to be in total alignment with the party. Like, I don't think that way.
Well, I've had other folks on here talking about the same thing, that freedom trope. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Florida for All. You're the executive director of that organization, and what that's doing to try to lift up folks' voices and maybe empower marginalized communities.
Yeah, so Florida for All is an awesome organization that is somewhat of a coalition and alignment group that works with other progressive organizations and groups that work with marginalized communities. We're comprised of Florida Immigrant Coalition, Faith in Florida, Florida Rising, Central Florida Jobs with Justice, Dream Defenders, and SEIU Florida. And we work to realize the theory of change in local areas and across the state, to figure out ways and how our communities can come together and build power. We were recently successful in Orlando through our Central Florida Theory of Change table, where we led the efforts for the rent stabilization measure that passed last year, where we had a rent cap, where we were going to do some research on like what happened during that rent cap and how we can, make sure that we have affordable housing for all. But, the big corporations, those landlords and apartment lobbyist groups and things like that, they filed, an injunction in court, and they stopped it from going into effect. And then, of course, what did the state do? They came and they preempted it and preempted a bunch of other tenants' rights.
Right.
So, that's why I said, the number one thing that folks can do is we gotta vote for people who really care about the people, not who care about corporations more than folks who don't have a roof over their head and can barely afford to put food on their table. And so that's what we at Florida for All do.
Well, thank you for that. I wanted to just ask you about, you live in Jacksonville. I wanted to ask you about your community. Jacksonville has about 1 million residents. About 30% of them are Black. How is the community responding to this racist hate crime killings over the weekend? How are folks feeling, and what are you all doing right now?
Folks are scared. Folks are terrorized. And that was the point of what happened, right? That was the guy's reason for doing that. He wanted to evoke terror in Black people. Let's be clear. This was white domestic terrorism that took place on Saturday. And now you have the Black community fearful to go to the grocery store. Kids don't want their parents to leave them home while they go to the grocery store because they feel like they're not going to come back. And that's not how anyone should live. No one should live that way.
Representative Angie Nixon, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before I say goodbye?
No, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'd like to check back with you in a couple months and see how things are going over there.
Thank you.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC, and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.